The underwater palace of Aquaria Prime shimmered like a mirage beneath the planet's azure seas. Crystalline corridors caught the filtered sunlight, creating dancing patterns across the assembled dignitaries' faces. Commander John Jack Reynolds shifted uncomfortably in his formal Earth Alliance uniform, the stiff collar a constant reminder of the diplomatic tightrope he walked. As humanity's military representative to the Galactic Council, he'd faced down hostile forces across 3-star systems, but nothing unnerved him quite like political gatherings, especially when Ambassador Keelia Tavant was present. The Auroran diplomat stood across the Grand Hall, surrounded by admirers from various species. Her iridescent skin glowed with a subtle blue luminescence, a trademark of her ancient race, while her silver-white hair was elaborately styled into what Jack had come to think of as her imperious crown. Even from a distance, he could see the slight curl of disdain at her lips whenever a human delegate approached her circle. Still brooding over our favorite Auroran Ice Queen, Captain Lara Mendez appeared at his side, offering a glass of something amber-colored. "Just observing," Jack replied, accepting the drink. "Know thy enemy and all that." Lara snorted. "She's not our enemy. Just thinks we're glorified primates who stumbled on a faster-than-light travel by accident, which is only slightly better than what most of the Taurians think of us." Jack sipped the drink and immediately regretted it. It burned like liquid fire. What in God's name is this? Rigelian whiskey. And the Taurians at least respect our combat abilities. Lara nodded toward Keelia. "But Her Highness over there? She thinks we're uncivilized brutes barely worthy of council membership." Jack watched Keelia's graceful movements, the way other dignitaries deferred to her authority despite her relative youth, by Auroran standards at least. Her people had been traversing the stars when humans were still figuring out agriculture. That ancient legacy exuded from her every gesture, every precisely chosen word. Commander Reynolds, the Aquarian envoy, a tall amphibious being with translucent skin and visible organs, approached. "The council session begins shortly. Your presence is requested at the central chamber." Jack nodded, straightening his uniform. "Thank you, Envoy Xylith." He made his way toward the central chamber, a massive dome whose ceiling revealed the ocean above. Schools of alien fish swam in hypnotic patterns, creating a living kaleidoscope. The representatives from 24 worlds had begun taking their seats around the circular table. Jack found his designated position next to Admiral Chinxiaolu, Earth's senior representative. "Commander," the Admiral nodded. "Ready for another thrilling debate on interstellar tariffs?" "Can't wait," Jack muttered. The session began with the usual formalities, acknowledgments of visiting dignitaries, moments of silence for recent interstellar conflicts, and updates on ongoing peace initiatives. Jack half listened, reviewing notes on his datapad. The real agenda item concerned expanded mining rights in the Proximus sector, critical for Earth's growing industrial needs. "And now," intoned the Rigelian chairperson, "we address the petition from Earth Alliance regarding mineral extraction permissions in the outer Proxima belt." Admiral Chin stood, presenting Earth's case methodically. The expansion would create jobs, stabilize rare element markets, and ultimately benefit multiple council species. Jack watched the room, gauging reactions. Most seemed neutral or mildly supportive until, "If I may interject," Keelia Tavant's melodic voice cut through the chamber. She hadn't bothered standing, a subtle insult that didn't go unnoticed. Earth's proposal displays their characteristic enthusiasm. However, it lacks critical environmental impact analysis for the Liridian migration routes. Ambassador Tavant, Admiral Chun replied evenly. "Those studies were submitted last cycle. I reviewed those studies." Keelia's voice dripped with condescension. Earth's analysis prioritizes immediate resource acquisition over long-term ecosystem stability. Typical of your species' approach, all muscle, no foresight. A ripple of murmurs spread through the chamber. Jack felt his face heat with anger as several delegates exchanged knowing glances. The Auroran had effectively dismissed months of careful scientific work with a wave of her elegant hand. "Perhaps," she continued, not bothering to hide her smirk. If humans devoted as much energy to diplomacy and ecological understanding as they do to military expansion, we might have received a more nuanced proposal. Jack stood abruptly, ignoring Admiral Chen's warning glance. The Earth Alliance appreciates Ambassador Tavan's concern for environmental welfare, he said, struggling to keep his tone diplomatic, particularly given Aurora's own extensive mining operations in 3 different systems, including the controversial Betelgeuse extraction that displaced an entire native species. Kelia's luminescent skin darkened slightly, the Auroran equivalent of a flush. Those operations occurred before current council regulations were established, Commander. Another fact your species would know if you joined interstellar society before rushing into space with your primitive rockets and colonial ambitions. Several delegates chuckled. Jack's knuckles whitened around his datapad. We value the perspective of all our members, the Regelian chairperson interjected diplomatically. Perhaps a joint committee to review Earth's proposal with Ambassador Tavan's concerns in mind? The session continued, but the damage was done. Earth's proposal was effectively tabled for further review, a bureaucratic death sentence in council terms. As the meeting adjourned, Jack exchanged terse words with Admiral Chun, who was clearly displeased with his outburst. She deliberately undermined us, Jack argued. We can't keep letting the Aurorans treat us like children. And antagonizing their lead diplomat helps how, exactly? The Admiral sighed. Cool off, Commander. That's an order. Jack stalked away, furious at Kelia's smug dismissal and his own lack of control. As he reached the exit corridor, he overheard her voice around the corner. Barely evolved beyond territorial displays, she was saying to a Cephalian diplomat. Did you see how quickly the commander resorted to historical whataboutism? This is why humans require careful handling. All reaction, no reflection. Something inside Jack snapped. 3 years of enduring her subtle and not-so-subtle barbs, of watching Earth's interests be dismissed because they were the newcomers to galactic society. 3 years of diplomatic slights and condescension. It was time for Ambassador Tavan to learn some respect for humanity, the hard way. An idea formed in his mind. Slowly at first, then with gathering momentum. Last week, he'd received intelligence about an upcoming diplomatic mission to Frontier Outpost Sigma 9, a remote station in a disputed sector. Routine border monitoring, technically, but politically sensitive. Each major council race would send a representative. Jack smiled grimly. With his security clearance, arranging to be Earth's representative wouldn't be difficult. And ensuring Kelia Tavan was selected as the Auroran delegate would just take a carefully worded suggestion about improving strained relations. Let's see how the Ice Queen handles a month on a cramped outpost, far from her admirers and luxuries. Jack's smile deepened. Perhaps it was time to teach Ambassador Tavan a lesson in human resourcefulness and give her a taste of her own medicine. He had no concrete plan beyond forcing her into close quarters where her superiority complex would be a liability rather than an asset. But the thought of her discomfort brought him satisfaction. For once, she would be the disadvantaged one. What Jack didn't anticipate was how drastically this simple act of revenge would alter the course of interstellar relations and his own life. The interstellar transport hummed softly as it cut through the darkness of space, leaving the gleaming orbital stations of the Galactic Council behind. Jack sat in the observation lounge, watching stars streak past in luminous ribbons. For a military vessel, the horizon's edge maintained impressive comfort, at least in the shared areas. The private quarters were another matter, utilitarian and cramped, exactly what one would expect on a long-haul mission to the frontier. He glanced across the lounge to where Kelia Tavan sat in elegant isolation, scrolling through data on her personal device. She'd barely acknowledged him during boarding, offering only the coldest of formal greetings. Her displeasure at being assigned to this mission was evident in the rigid set of her shoulders and the occasional irritated flick of her fingers across the screen. Magnificent view, isn't it? Jack said, breaking the silence. Nothing like deep space to put things in perspective. Kelia looked up, her silver eyes narrowing slightly. I've traversed 17 star systems, Commander. The novelty of interstellar transit faded long ago. Just making conversation. Is that why you engineered this assignment? For conversation, she set down her device. Don't look surprised. I have sources too. This mission was originally slated for a junior diplomatic officer until you specifically requested an experienced negotiator from Aurora. Jack maintained a neutral expression. The situation at Sigma 9 is delicate. We need our best people. Spare me. She rose, her flowing attire shimmering with subtle bioluminescence. You wanted petty revenge for the council meeting. How disappointingly human. Before Jack could respond, the ship's pilot, Lieutenant Carol Wilson, entered the lounge. Commander, Ambassador, she nodded to each in turn. We're approaching the jump gate. Transition in approximately 15 minutes. You might experience some temporal discomfort. Thank you, Lieutenant, Jack said. I trust our course remains secure. All clear, sir. Though there's been increased Taurian activity in the adjacent sector. Kara's expression remained professional, but Jack caught her subtle glance toward Keelia. The crew had quickly sensed the tension between the human commander and the Auroran diplomat. Taurians frequently patrol their borders, Keelia commented. I wouldn't give it much thought. They've moved 3 battlecruisers into the region in the past week, Kara countered. That's not routine patrolling. Keelia arched a delicate eyebrow. And humans wonder why other species find them paranoid. Jack intervened before his pilot could respond. Thank you, Lieutenant. Keep me informed of any changes. After Kara left, an uncomfortable silence descended. Jack studied Keelia's profile as she returned to the viewport. Despite his irritation, he couldn't deny she possessed an otherworldly beauty, the genetic perfection of a species that had mastered biological engineering millennia ago. You know, he said, this mission could be an opportunity. For what exactly? Understanding. You think you know humans. I think I understand Aurorans. Maybe we're both wrong. Keelia turned to him, genuine surprise flashing across her features before her composed mask returned. An intriguing proposition, Commander. But understand this. I am here because my government ordered it, not to engage in cultural exchange. Fair enough. The ship lurched as it entered the jump gate, reality distorting around them. Keelia gripped the nearest handhold, her usual grace momentarily compromised. Jack felt the familiar disorientation of gate travel, like every cell in his body being simultaneously pulled apart and compressed. When they emerged, the stars had rearranged themselves. Ahead loomed the frontier, wilder space, less charted, more dangerous. 2 days until arrival at Sigma 9, announced the ship's AI. Security protocols upgraded to level yellow. The journey continued in a pattern of tense conversations and prolonged silences. Jack and Keelia found themselves debating everything from interstellar governance to cultural expressions. Despite her condescension, Jack grudgingly admired her intellect. She had a way of dissecting his arguments that was simultaneously infuriating and impressive. Your species' insistence on individualism handicaps your diplomatic efforts, she remarked during one heated exchange. You negotiate as individuals, not as a unified civilization. And your rigid hierarchies stifle innovation, he countered. When was the last time Aurora produced a truly revolutionary idea? Something shifted in their dynamic, mutual antagonism evolving into a strange form of respect. Jack found himself looking forward to their verbal sparring, preparing points to challenge her assumptions. He suspected, though she'd never admit it, that she too was beginning to enjoy their exchanges. The final approach to Outpost Sigma 9 revealed a stark, utilitarian structure clinging to a barren asteroid. No graceful architecture or aesthetic considerations. Just a functional human/alien outpost on the edge of civilized space. Welcome to the frontier, Jack said as they disembarked. Not quite the Aquarian Palace, is it? Charming, Keelia replied dryly, surveying the metal corridors and practical fixtures. How utterly human. The outpost director, a tall insectoid named Zanus, greeted them in the arrival bay. His chitinous exoskeleton gleamed under the harsh lighting, for arms extending in the universal gesture of welcome. Commander Reynolds, Ambassador Tavant. His translator module converted the clicks and buzzes of his native speech. Sigma 9 is honored by your presence. I must warn you, conditions here are austere compared to Central Worlds. We maintain minimal staff and limited amenities. We understand, Director, Jack replied. Standard frontier protocol. Indeed. The other representatives arrived yesterday. We've prepared a welcome gathering in the central hub. Zanus's compound eyes shifted between them. I should mention, privacy is limited here. Quarters are compact, and common areas serve multiple functions. Kelia's expression remained diplomatic, but Jack caught the slight twitch of discomfort. He suppressed a smile. This was exactly what he'd wanted, to see the proud Auroran forced to adapt to conditions that didn't cater to her elevated status. The central hub proved to be a converted cargo area. Makeshift tables displayed an assortment of food and beverages from various worlds. Representatives from 5 other species mingled awkwardly in the confined space. The isolation affects everyone eventually, Zanus explained as he guided them through introductions. These gatherings maintain morale and diplomatic relations. Jack nodded toward a crystalline decanter containing electric blue liquid. I see you've brought out the special reserves. Aurelian brandy, Zanus confirmed. Rare even in core systems. A gift from the Centauri delegation last cycle. We save it for significant occasions. Potent stuff, Jack commented. Indeed. Affects most species strongly, particularly. Zanus hesitated, mandibles clicking softly. Well, particularly humans and Aurorans. Kelia's attention snapped to the conversation. You have actual Aurelian brandy? From a 7th distillery. The very same, the insectoid confirmed. Would you care to sample it, Ambassador? Jack watched with interest as Kelia approached the decanter. For the first time since their departure, she appeared genuinely excited about something. Her fingers traced the crystalline patterns reverently. This predates Earth's first space launch, she murmured. Few humans have tasted true Aurelian brandy. I've had the synthetic version, Jack said, moving closer. Impressive enough. Kelia gave him a look that was almost pitying. Synthetic versions cannot replicate the quantum-bonded molecules of the original. The experience is transcendent. High praise from Auroran. Jack smiled. Now I'm curious. The gathering progressed with the stilted formality typical of diplomatic functions. Jack circulated, connecting with the representatives from Rigel, Centauri, and the Cephalian Concordat. Throughout the evening, he kept finding his attention drawn back to Kelia. In this setting, away from the grandeur of the council chambers, something about her seemed different, less guarded, perhaps. As the night wore on, the conversation turned to border politics and trade agreements. The Taurian representative, a reptilian humanoid named Vazik, was particularly vocal about encroachment on traditional territories. Perhaps if your traditional territories hadn't mysteriously expanded every decade, there would be less concern, Kelia countered, her diplomatic veneer thinning. Rich words from an Auroran, Vazik hissed. Your people claimed an entire sector based on ancient star charts no other species can verify. The tension in the room heightened. Jack stepped in before the exchange could escalate further. I believe we're here to monitor the current borders, not redraw them, he said smoothly. Speaking of monitoring, Director Zanus, when do operations commence? The intervention worked, redirecting the conversation to safer topics. As the gathering began to disperse, Jack found himself standing beside the Aurelian brandy with Kelia. Diplomatic rescue, Commander? She asked, her voice carrying a hint of amusement. I wasn't aware humans possessed such subtlety. We're full of surprises. Jack examined the blue liquid swirling in the decanter. So, is this truly as remarkable as you claim? Kelia studied him for a moment, then reached for 2 small crystal glasses. Perhaps you should judge for yourself. She poured a small amount into each glass, the liquid seeming to glow from within. A cultural exchange? Jack raised an eyebrow. Scientific curiosity. I wonder if human physiology can truly appreciate its complexities. She offered him a glass, her silver eyes challenging. Jack accepted it, noting how the brandy seemed to respond to his touch, swirling of its own accord. To scientific inquiry, then. To unexpected frontiers, Keelia countered, raising her glass. They drank. Jack felt an immediate warmth, followed by cascading sensations, flavors and textures he couldn't name, emotions that weren't quite his own. The room seemed to shimmer, sound becoming more textured, colors more vivid. He struggled to find words. Yes, Keelia agreed, her usual composure slightly undone. Her skin glowed more intensely, pupils dilated. The molecular structure interacts directly with sensory perception. Another? Jack suggested, surprised by his own eagerness. She hesitated only briefly before nodding. A comparative experiment. Different volumes, different effects. 2 glasses became 4. Formal titles gave way to first names. Somehow they found themselves in a secluded corner of the hub, voices lowered, conversation flowing more freely than either would have thought possible. Your people don't understand Aurora's caution, Keelia said, her consonants slightly softened. We've seen promising species destroy themselves through unchecked expansion. And you don't understand our drive, Jack replied, feeling unusually philosophical. Humanity survived its own near-extinction events. We're hardwired to push boundaries. Perhaps that's what fascinates me, she admitted, then looked startled at her own candor. I fascinate you. Jack leaned closer, the brandy emboldening him. Your species, she corrected, but didn't move away. So young, yet so resilient. Auroran evolutionary history was more gradual. Jack found himself studying the luminescent patterns across her skin, how they shifted with her emotions. What does that mean? The glowing? Keelia looked down, seemingly surprised by the intensity of her bioluminescence. It's responsive to emotional states and certain substances. She gave a small, uncharacteristic laugh. I'm practically broadcasting at the moment. Broadcasting what? Her silver eyes met his, wider and more vulnerable than he'd ever seen them. Curiosity, interest, things an Auroran diplomat shouldn't feel toward a human military commander. The air between them changed, charged with something neither had anticipated. Jack became acutely aware of their isolation in this corner, how the hub had emptied without them noticing, how the station's lighting had dimmed to simulate night. Keelia, he said, her name feeling strange and right on his tongue. This isn't what I planned when I arranged this mission. She raised an eyebrow, luminescence pulsing slightly. Honesty? The brandy is more potent than I remembered. I wanted to see you uncomfortable, he admitted, away from your admirers and privileges. I know. She moved closer, and I wanted to see you fail at diplomacy. We've both been less than noble. Jack wasn't sure who moved first. Perhaps it was simultaneous, a mutual surrendering to curiosity, to the brandy's effects, to the strange intimacy of frontiers where normal rules seemed distant. Their lips met, and Jack felt a literal spark, a small static discharge where Auroran physiology met human. Keelia gasped, then pulled him closer. Her skin glowed brighter, warming beneath his touch. Everything about her was both alien and intoxicating. The faint ozone scent, the silken texture, the electric current that seemed to pass between them. Some distant part of Jack's mind warned him this was crossing a dangerous line. Professional boundaries, interspecies complications, his original intent for revenge, all reasons to pull away. But the brandy had lowered those defenses, replaced calculation with curiosity and antagonism with attraction. We should stop, Keelia whispered against his neck, even as her fingers traced patterns across his uniform. Absolutely, Jack agreed, cupping her face gently. This is reckless, completely inappropriate, potentially disastrous. Neither moved away. Instead, they found themselves navigating the station's corridors toward private quarters, a journey interrupted by moments of pressing against bulkheads, exploring unfamiliar anatomies, questioning and then surrendering to an attraction neither had recognized until this moment. In the darkness of Jack's austere quarters, inhibitions dissolved completely. The brandy's effects amplified every sensation, her skin illuminating the room in pulses of blue-white light, his hands mapping territories no human had explored. They discovered compatible differences and surprising similarities, laughter mixing with gasps of pleasure. Neither spoke of consequences or tomorrows. On this frontier outpost, suspended between worlds, there existed only this impossible now, where an Auroran ambassador and a human commander found connection across an interstellar divide. Later, tangled in standard-issue betting that now seemed transformed into something exotic, Jack watched Kelia's breathing slow into sleep. Her luminescence had dimmed to a soft glow that outlined her form in the darkness. He should feel triumph, he thought drowsily. His revenge plan had evolved into something far more unexpected, yet ultimately more devastating to her carefully maintained superiority. Instead, he felt a strange protective tenderness that the sobering part of his mind warned him to guard against. This hadn't been about genuine connection, he reminded himself. Just an unexpected detour, fueled by alien brandy and frontier isolation. Yet as sleep claimed him, his last conscious thought was less strategic. She called me Jack, not Commander. And somehow, that seemed to matter more than any diplomatic victory. Neither of them could have predicted how significantly this night would alter galactic politics or their own intertwined destinies. The council chamber buzzed with activity as delegates settled in for the quarterly security briefing. Jack stood near the Earth delegation, reviewing notes on his datapad while surreptitiously watching the entrance. It had been 6 weeks since the Sigma-9 mission, 6 weeks of awkward avoidance and formal interactions with Kelia. The morning after their encounter, they'd awoken to crushing sobriety and mutual embarrassment. They'd agreed. The incident was a lapse in judgment, induced by the Aurelian brandy's potent effects. They would complete their duties professionally and never speak of it again. The remainder of the mission had proceeded with painful formality. Every accidental touch or prolonged eye contact became a source of discomfort. Their previous animated debates gave way to terse, efficient exchanges. When they'd returned to council space, both had thrown themselves into separate diplomatic matters, ensuring their paths rarely crossed. Now, Jack couldn't help scanning the chamber for her distinctive glow. He told himself it was strategic awareness, keeping track of a formidable political opponent. He ignored the tightening in his chest when she finally appeared at the Auroran delegation's entrance. Something was different. Her usual confident stride seemed measured, careful. Her luminescence appeared muted, and dark shadows accented her silver eyes. She nodded briefly towards several dignitaries, but made no effort to engage in the pre-session networking that typically preceded these meetings. "She looks terrible," murmured Admiral Chim beside him. "Heard she's been ill." Even requested a temporary reduction in duties. Jack maintained a neutral expression. The frontier mission was challenging for everyone. Limited resources, isolation. Perhaps. The Admiral studied him curiously, though most didn't return looking like they'd seen a ghost. Before Jack could respond, the Regelian chairperson called the session to order. The usual protocols followed: roll call, approval of previous minutes, security updates from various sectors. Jack tried to focus, but his attention kept drifting to Kelia. She sat rigidly, occasionally pressing a hand to her temple or sipping water. Twice, she excused herself briefly from the proceedings. When the Taurian representative began detailing mineral rights violations in the Epsilon sector, Jack noticed Kelia sway slightly in her seat. Her skin flickered, an unusual disruption in Auroran bioluminescence. He frowned, genuinely concerned. "Ambassador Tavant," the chairperson suddenly addressed her. "As your government has expressed particular interest in the Epsilon regulations, would you share Aurora's position?" Kelia rose, her composure visibly strained. "Thank you, chairperson. Aurora believes the current situation requires." She faltered, gripping the edge of the table. requires careful consideration of historical precedents, and her voice trailed off. The luminescent patterns across her skin pulsed erratically. Several delegates exchanged concerned glances. Ambassador, prompted the chairperson. Kelia opened her mouth to continue, then abruptly collapsed. The chamber erupted in chaos. Medical personnel rushed forward. Jack found himself moving without conscious decision, pushing past startled delegates to reach her side. "Give her space," he commanded, kneeling beside her unconscious form. Her skin was hot to the touch, luminescence fluctuating wildly. "She needs immediate medical attention." The council's chief physician, a Cephalian with advanced medical training, arrived with an emergency kit. As he began scanning Kelia, her eyes fluttered open, disoriented and unfocused. "What happened?" she whispered. "You collapsed," Jack answered, uncomfortably aware of the crowd gathering around them. "The doctor is examining you now." The Cephalian physician frowned at his readings, tentacles adjusting the scanner. He showed the results to a colleague, their whispered conversation inaudible. "What is it?" Jack demanded. "What's wrong with her?" The physician regarded him with compound eyes that betrayed nothing. "Ambassador Tavant requires specialized care. We need to move her to the medical bay immediately." "I'll accompany her," Jack stated, then added awkwardly, as Earth's security representative. For diplomatic protocol. No one questioned his logic as they transferred Kelia to a hovering medical platform. She drifted in and out of consciousness during the journey to the council's advanced medical facility. Jack remained beside her, aware of the political implications but unable to leave. In the sterile environment of the medical bay, a team of multi-species practitioners conducted more thorough examinations. Jack waited outside the treatment room, pacing anxiously. He'd notified both Earth Command and the Auroran Embassy of the situation, establishing his presence as a diplomatic courtesy. Neither had objected, though he'd received curious inquiries from his superiors. After what seemed like hours, the Cephalian physician emerged. "Commander Reynolds," he began formally, "Ambassador Tavant is stabilized, but what? What's wrong with her?" The physician's tentacles curled anxiously. "The ambassador is experiencing a rare physiological condition. We've never seen this specific case before." Jack's patience evaporated. "Speak plainly, doctor. What condition?" "Ambassador Tavant is pregnant." The words hit Jack like a physical blow. "That's impossible," he managed after a moment. "Aurorans and humans aren't genetically compatible. Our DNA structures are fundamentally different." Nevertheless, the physician continued, "She carries a hybrid embryo, approximately 6 weeks developed. The collapse was caused by her system struggling to adapt to the unprecedented genetic combination." Jack felt the room spin slightly. 6 weeks. Sigma 9. The implications crashed through his mind like a wave. "Does she know?" he asked hoarsely. "Yes. She's requesting to speak with you. Alone." The physician's compound eyes studied him intently. "I presume there's a reason for that request, Commander." Jack nodded numbly and moved toward the treatment room, legs operating on autopilot while his mind raced. This was biologically impossible, or supposed to be. Interspecies reproduction distanced publicly while using every back channel to stay informed. The situation came to a head 1 week later during a high-stakes negotiation between Earth and the Taurian Empire. Territorial disputes in the Arcturus sector had escalated, with both sides accusing the other of military encroachment. The Council had called an emergency session to prevent further hostilities. Jack attended alongside Admiral Chun and Earth's diplomatic team. The chamber was tense, representatives from 24 worlds witnessing the proceedings. To his surprise, Kelia was present at the Auroran delegation, though she looked pale and kept her luminescence deliberately subdued. The Taurian ambassador, a heavily decorated military figure named General Krav, presented his case aggressively. Earth vessels have violated established boundaries 17 times in the past month. We demand immediate withdrawal and reparations. Admiral Chun countered with evidence of Taurian weapons installations in the neutral zone. The debate grew heated, delegates from smaller worlds shifting uncomfortably as the two powers traded increasingly pointed accusations. Earth's expansionist agenda is clear, General Krav snarled, reptilian features contorting. Your kind cannot be trusted with advanced technology. You were tribal warriors mere centuries ago, and your empire has a documented history of absorption through intimidation, Admiral Chun responded coolly. Perhaps transparency about your actual fleet positions would clarify matters. Jack observed the escalating tensions with growing concern. These negotiations were critical to preventing outright military conflict. The Rigelian chairperson struggled to maintain order as voices rose and translator modules strained to keep pace with heated rhetoric. Suddenly, a sharp gasp drew everyone's attention. Kelia had risen from her seat, one hand pressed against her abdomen, her skin pulsing with uncontrolled luminescence. She swayed dangerously. Jack reacted instinctively, crossing the chamber in swift strides. He reached her just as her knees buckled, catching her before she hit the floor. "Medical emergency," he shouted, cradling her as her luminescence flickered erratically. Her skin burned against his, and her breathing came in shallow gasps. "Let me through." The council physician pushed through the stunned delegates. "She needs immediate treatment." Kelia's eyes fluttered open, focusing briefly on Jack's face. "The embryo," she whispered. "Complications." Jack felt a surge of panic. "She needs specialized care. Now." The physician began emergency stabilization procedures while confusion rippled through the chamber. Delegates whispered urgently, and Jack became acutely aware of the political disaster unfolding alongside the medical one. "Embryo." General Krav's translator amplified his incredulous tone. "The Auroran ambassador is pregnant." Jack kept his attention on Kelia, ignoring the growing murmurs until he felt her hand grip his uniform with surprising strength. "Jack," she gasped, her voice barely audible. "They need to know, before rumors." Worse, her silver eyes held his, conveying meaning beyond words. With sudden clarity, Jack understood. If they didn't control this narrative immediately, the political fallout would be catastrophic. Conspiracy theories, accusations of biological experimentation, further deterioration of species relations. Making a split-second decision that would forever alter his career in galactic politics, Jack stood to address the chamber, still supporting Kelia as medical staff prepared a transport stretcher. "Distinguished representatives," his voice cut through the chaos. "Ambassador Tavant requires immediate medical attention for a condition that affects more than just Aurora." He took a deep breath, feeling hundreds of eyes upon him. "She is carrying my child. A human-Auran hybrid conceived during our diplomatic mission to Outpost Sigma-9. The chamber exploded into pandemonium. Delegates shouted questions and exclamations in dozens of languages. The Auroran contingent surged forward, faces contorted with shock and outrage. Admiral Chun stared at Jack with undisguised horror. Through it all, Jack maintained his protective stance over Kelia as medical staff transferred her to the stretcher. "I will provide full explanations after ensuring Ambassador Tavant receives proper care," he announced, then turned to follow the medical team, ignoring the commands to remain from multiple authorities. In the relative quiet of the medical transport, Kelia's eyes opened again. "That was not subtle," she murmured, her voice weak but tinged with unexpected humor. "Subtlety wasn't an option," Jack replied, gripping her hand. Is the embryo?" Both in distress, the physician interjected, monitoring vital signs. "We're transporting to the Xenogenetic Specialty Wing. We've assembled experts in comparative biology." Jack nodded, his mind racing, with implications while his heart pounded with more immediate concerns. "You'll be all right," he told Kelia, unsure if he was convincing her or himself. Her luminescence pulsed weakly. "You didn't need to claim responsibility, so?" "Publicly. I am responsible," he said firmly. "And I wasn't about to let you face this alone while I hid behind diplomatic immunity." Something shifted in her expression, surprise, followed by the ghost of admiration. Very human of you, she whispered. But not entirely foolish. The medical bay erupted into activity upon their arrival. Specialists from 3 species converged, transferring Kelia to an advanced treatment pod, while Jack was firmly directed to wait outside. For hours, he paced the waiting area, fielding increasingly demanding communication from Earth Command, the Auroran Embassy, and the Council Security Office. Admiral Chun arrived personally, his expression a mixture of fury and disbelief. "Commander Reynolds," he began, voice dangerously controlled. "Would you care to explain how you managed to impregnate the Auroran ambassador and trigger what may be the most significant diplomatic incident of the decade?" Jack straightened. "Sir, the situation is complicated." Evidently, the Admiral's tone was scathing. Earth Central is in chaos. The Auroran High Council is demanding explanations. Half the galaxy thinks this is some kind of human biological experimentation, and the other half believes it's an Auroran plot to infiltrate Earth's genetic line. "None of that is true," Jack insisted. "It was unexpected and unprecedented. We were exposed to Aurelian brandy during the Frontier mission. There were effects we didn't anticipate." The Admiral's expression shifted slightly. "Aurelian brandy? The authentic variety?" "Yes, sir. That complicates matters." He sighed heavily. "The psychoactive properties are well documented. Still doesn't explain the genetic compatibility. The doctors are working on that mystery now." A tense silence fell between them. Finally, the Admiral spoke again. "Whatever your personal feelings in this matter, Commander, you must recognize the political implications. This will change interspecies relations permanently." "I understand, sir." "Do you?" The Admiral studied him. "Because your career in official diplomatic channels is effectively over. You'll be recalled to Earth for debriefing and likely reassignment." Jack nodded stiffly. "After Ambassador Tavant is stabilized." "That's not negotiable." He was interrupted by the appearance of the Cephalian physician, tentacles arranged in a configuration Jack had come to recognize as cautiously positive. "Commander Reynolds," the physician began, "we've stabilized both Ambassador Tavant and the embryo. She's conscious and asking for you." Jack turned to Admiral Chun. "Sir, with respect." "Go." The Admiral cut him off. "But this conversation isn't over." Inside the treatment room, Kelia reclined in a specialized medical pod. Her luminescence had stabilized into a steady, though subdued, glow. Various monitors displayed biological readings Jack couldn't interpret, but the atmosphere was noticeably less tense than before. "Commander," she acknowledged formally, aware of the medical staff still present. "Ambassador," he responded in kind. Then more quietly, "How are you feeling?" "Better." Her silver eyes studied him. The specialists identified the problem. The embryo's development triggered a hormone cascade my system wasn't prepared to manage. They've synthesized stabilizing compounds. Jack exhaled with relief. "And long-term?" A female Auroran doctor stepped forward. "If I may, Ambassador, Commander Reynolds should understand the full situation." Kelia nodded permission. "The hybrid embryo appears viable, but not without significant medical support," the doctor explained. "Ambassador Tavant's system will require regular treatments to accommodate the developing fetus. There are risks to both mother and child." "What kind of risks?" Jack asked. "For the ambassador, immunological responses that could damage her organs if not carefully managed. For the embryo, developmental uncertainties. We're navigating entirely new genetic territory." Jack absorbed this soberly. "What are the options?" The doctor glanced at Kelia, who answered instead. "I've decided to continue the pregnancy with medical supervision." Her declaration caught Jack by surprise. Given her initial fury and the political implications, he'd expected a different decision. "You're certain?" he asked quietly. Kelia's luminescence shifted into patterns he hadn't seen before. Complex, thoughtful. "This is unprecedented in documented galactic history. A viable hybrid between humans and Aurorans was considered biologically impossible." Her voice softened slightly. "Beyond the personal implications, this has scientific and cultural significance I cannot dismiss." Jack suspected there was more to her. decision than scientific interest, but he nodded understanding. Then we faced this together. The Auroran doctor cleared her throat delicately. There are political considerations as well. The Auroran High Council has expressed concern about potential diplomatic complications. I imagine Earth Command has similar concerns, Jack replied dryly. Kelia's expression hardened. I am still Auroran ambassador. My personal situation does not change my commitment to my people or my duties. Nor mine, Jack agreed, though I suspect our respective governments may have different ideas. They were interrupted by the arrival of an imposing Auroran official, tall, with elaborately patterned luminescence that marked him as a High Council representative. His silver eyes were cold as he surveyed the room. Ambassador Tavant, he began without preamble. The High Council requires a full accounting of this situation. Jack stepped forward. Structured diplomatic lives. The days that followed brought chaos and transformation. News of the hybrid pregnancy spread through galactic channels with unprecedented speed. Earth and Aurora scrambled to establish official positions, while the Council found itself mediating an entirely new form of interspecies relation. Jack faced multiple inquiries, his military career effectively suspended while political ramifications were assessed. Kelia remained under medical supervision, her diplomatic status technically intact, but her actual authority temporarily diminished. Yet amidst the political turbulence, something unexpected developed. Jack visited daily, initially for formal planning sessions with various officials present, then increasingly in quieter moments when medical staff allowed them privacy. Their conversations evolved from awkward discussions of logistics to more personal exchanges. Jack found himself sharing stories of his childhood in Earth's Pacific Northwest, while Kelia spoke of Auroran cultural practices with a candor rarely shown to outsiders. The walls between diplomat and commander, Auroran and human, gradually lowered. During one such visit, 2 weeks after the council chamber incident, Jack arrived to find Kelia sitting up in bed, reviewing data on a holographic display. The latest medical report, she explained when he entered. The hybridization process is stabilizing. The embryo is developing its own unique systems to reconcile our different biologies. Jack studied the rotating image, a tiny form with recognizable features of both species. Remarkable, he murmured. Indeed, Kelia's luminescence pulsed with something like wonder. The adaptive capacities exceed anything our scientists predicted. It's taken aspects of both genetic codes and created novel solutions. Like parents, like child, Jack observed with a smile. Adapting to impossible circumstances. Kelia gave him a considering look. An apt metaphor. He sat beside her, noticing how her luminescence brightened slightly at his proximity, a reaction he'd begun to recognize as positive. Any word from the High Council? They proposed terms, she sighed. I'm to return to Aurora for the duration of the pregnancy, under medical and political supervision. Jack felt a strange pang of loss. They've requested immediate transfer, but I've negotiated a delay until the medical team confirms travel safety. Her silver eyes met his. Approximately 1 week. I see. Jack tried to keep his tone neutral. And after birth? Kelia's luminescence flickered with uncertainty. The child would be studied, of course. The first verified human-Auroran hybrid. The scientific significance alone. Studied, Jack repeated flatly. Like a specimen? That's not. She began defensively, then stopped. Perhaps not so different from what your government would propose. The uncomfortable truth hung between them. Both Earth and Aurora viewed the developing child as a biological, political, and strategic phenomenon first, a child second. There must be another option, Jack said finally. One that doesn't reduce our child to a political bargaining chip or scientific curiosity. Kelia's expression registered surprise at his use of our child, but she didn't correct him. Instead, her luminescence shifted into thoughtful patterns. The Galactic Council has the authority to grant special status to cases of significant interspecies importance, she said slowly. A precedent exists from the Regelian-Cephalian Accords. Special status? Joint custody under council supervision, Kelia explained. Neutral territory. Protected status for both parent and child. Hope stirred in Jack's chest. That would require bypassing both our governments. And substantial political capital, she agreed. But not impossible. Their eyes met, a silent understanding passing between them. This wasn't just about diplomatic maneuvering anymore. It was about protecting a new life that, against all odds, they had created together. I have contacts in the Centauri delegation, Jack offered. They've been sympathetic to our situation. And I maintain positive relations with the Aquarian representatives, Kelia added. They value unique biological developments. For the next hour, they sketched out a strategy, careful approaches to potential allies, documentation of the scientific significance that transcended political boundaries, appeals to the Council's founding principles of interspecies cooperation. Jack was struck by how naturally they worked together, their former antagonism transformed into complementary strengths. Kelia's diplomatic finesse balanced his strategic directness. Her extensive knowledge of council precedent combined with his understanding of security protocols. When a medical attendant finally arrived to administer Kelia's treatment, they had outlined a preliminary approach. Jack rose to leave, but Kelia caught his hand. Jack! Her voice was softer than he'd ever heard it. I need to know, is this merely about responsibility to you, or something more? The question caught him off guard. He'd been so focused on immediate problems that he'd avoided examining his evolving feelings too closely. It began as responsibility, he admitted. But now, he looked down at their joined hands, five-fingered human clasp with six-fingered Auroran. Now I find myself caring about more than just doing what's right. Her luminescence pulsed with subtle patterns he was learning to read as emotional complexity. As do I, she said simply. An unexpected development. The story of us, it seems. Their shared smile carried the weight of understanding. That somewhere between antagonism and crisis, something deeper had taken root. Not the instant passion of their night at Sigma 9, but something more substantial. Respect, partnership, and the beginnings of genuine affection. As Jack left the medical facility, he felt both lighter and more determined than he had in weeks. The path ahead remained fraught with political landmines and biological uncertainties. But for the first time, he didn't face it as an isolated duty. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. Not as commander and ambassador, but as Jack and Kelia, soon-to-be parents of a child that represented both the ultimate diplomatic complication and the most profound hope for genuine understanding between their worlds. The next days passed in a flurry of discreet communications and careful alliance building. Jack and Kelia worked separately and together, laying groundwork for their council petition while navigating increasing pressure from their respective governments. Earth Command had officially suspended Jack pending review, though Undersecretary Hammond maintained regular contact, clearly trying to gauge his intentions. The Auroran High Council sent increasingly insistent demands for Kelia's return, citing concerns about appropriate care and cultural continuity. 5 days before Kelia's scheduled transport to Aurora, Jack arrived at the medical facility to find her sitting fully dressed at the edge of her bed, her few personal belongings packed in a sleek case. What's happening? He asked, immediately concerned. Kelia's luminescence pulsed with urgency. The High Council is sending an escort today, not next week. They've overridden the medical recommendations and arranged immediate transit. They can't do that, Jack protested. The doctors haven't cleared you for interstellar travel. They've brought their own medical team with specialized equipment. Her voice remained calm, but her luminescence betrayed anxiety. Technically, they have the authority. I am still an Auroran citizen, regardless of my diplomatic status. Jack recognized the strategic maneuver. By physically relocating Kelia to Aurora, the High Council would effectively isolate her from Earth influence, and from him. Once there, it would be nearly impossible to maintain their joint approach to the child's future. When? He asked tersely. 2 hours. Just enough time to complete discharge protocols. Jack paced the small room, mind racing through options. We need to accelerate our timeline. Contact the Centauri and Aquarian representatives immediately. Already done, Kelia confirmed. They've agreed to introduce our petition at tomorrow's session. That's too late, Jack interrupted. Once you're in Auroran space, the diplomatic dynamics shift entirely. Kelia's luminescence dimmed with resignation. I know, but there are no other options that don't involve violating multiple interstellar laws. Jack stopped pacing, struck by a realization. Actually, there might be one option. What are you thinking? Kelia's eyes narrowed with suspicion. The Central Medical Facility is technically Council-neutral territory, he began, formulating the plan as he spoke. Under Provision 87C of the Galactic Charter, any sentient being facing a medical crisis can petition for emergency sanctuary. Kelia's luminescence flickered with understanding. Medical sanctuary? That's a significant escalation. But legal, Jack countered, and it would force an immediate council hearing rather than allowing either of our governments to control the narrative. It would also potentially end both our careers, Kelia pointed out. Claiming sanctuary against my own government would be seen as defection, and supporting you would be insubordination at best, treason at worst, Jack acknowledged grimly. But it would protect the child until the council can make an independent determination. Their eyes met in silent communication, weighing personal consequences against principles. After a moment, Kelia's luminescence shifted to patterns Jack now recognized as determination. To petition for sanctuary, I would need to demonstrate immediate threat, she said, thinking aloud. The Auroran medical team's transport protocols would need to be proven potentially harmful. Jack nodded. The facility's chief medical officer could be persuaded to conduct an independent assessment. Dr. Surlov has been supportive of our situation. For the next hour, they refined their approach with the practiced efficiency of experienced strategists. Jack contacted Dr. Surlov while Kelia prepared the necessary documentation for sanctuary status. They worked seamlessly, anticipating each other's needs and complementing each other's strengths. When the Auroran delegation arrived, led by Counselor Nevar himself, they found not a compliant ambassador ready for transport, but a formal medical hearing already in progress. What is the meaning of this? Nevar demanded, luminescence flaring with anger as he entered the conference room adjacent to Kelia's medical quarters. Dr. Surlov, a dignified Rigelian with 4 decades of xenobiological experience, met his gaze steadily. A medical evaluation, Counselor. Ambassador Tavin has expressed concerns about the proposed transport protocols. Our medical team has certified the procedures as safe, Nevar countered, gesturing to the 3 Auroran physicians who accompanied him. This delay is unnecessary and politically motivated. Jack stepped forward. The ambassador's unique condition requires independent verification of all procedures. As the father of the child, I have equal standing in medical decisions under Council Provision 54B. Nevar's luminescence pulsed with barely contained rage. You have manipulated council procedures to interfere with Auroran internal matters, Commander. This will have severe diplomatic consequences. This isn't about politics, Jack replied evenly. It's about ensuring the safety of both Ambassador Tavant and the child. A child that represents a biological impossibility that must be thoroughly studied under controlled conditions, Nevar insisted. Aurora has the most advanced genetic facilities in a quadrant, and the child is half human, Jack reminded him, with rights under both jurisdictions. The standoff continued for tense minutes until Dr. Surlov cleared his throat significantly. After reviewing the proposed transport protocols, he announced formally, I have determined that they do not adequately address the unique immunological challenges presented by Ambassador Tavant's condition. He activated a holographic display showing comparative medical data. The accelerated transition through multiple gravitational fields poses unacceptable risks of placental disruption. Additionally, the proposed immunosuppressants could compromise the hybrid embryo's developing nervous system. Nevar's expression hardened. Our specialists disagree with your assessment, which is precisely why, Kelia spoke up, her voice steady despite her obvious fatigue. "I am formally petitioning for medical sanctuary under Provision 87C of the Galactic Charter." The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Sanctuary was rarely invoked and would immediately trigger council oversight. "You cannot be serious." Nevar stared at her in disbelief. "You would betray your people for this." "Human." Kelia's luminescence intensified, patterns shifting to formal declaration mode. "I betray no one by protecting a child of unprecedented significance to both our species." The petition requests neutral evaluation and temporary protected status until the Council can determine appropriate protocols. "This is Commander Reynolds' influence," Nevar accused. "He has manipulated you." "I'm still Ambassador Kelia Tavant," she cut him off, voice sharp with authority. "My judgment remains my own, Counselor. You would do well to remember that." Jack suppressed a smile at the flash of the old, imperious Kelia, the diplomat who had intimidated him during countless council sessions. Now that formidable presence was their alliance's greatest strength. Dr. Surlov formally recorded the petition, transmitting it directly to the council's central authority. "The petition has been registered," he confirmed. "Under council law, Ambassador Tavant remains under neutral medical jurisdiction pending full hearing." Nevar's luminescence darkened dangerously. "The High Council will not forget this," he warned Kelia, "nor will it forget Earth's interference." He fixed Jack with a cold stare before turning to leave, his medical team following reluctantly. When they had gone, Kelia sank into the nearest chair, luminescence dimming with exhaustion. Jack moved to her side immediately. "Are you all right?" She nodded wearily. "The confrontation required more energy than I anticipated. This pregnancy affects my reserves significantly." Jack knelt beside her, taking her hand. "You were magnificent." A faint smile touched her lips. "As were you, Commander. We make a formidable diplomatic team when not working against each other. Imagine what we could accomplish as allies," he said softly. Her silver eyes met his, luminescence shifting to intimate patterns he was learning to recognize. "I'm beginning to imagine precisely that." The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. Then Dr. Surlov discreetly cleared his throat. "The council adjudicator has acknowledged the petition," he informed them. "A formal hearing is scheduled for tomorrow's session. Until then, Ambassador Tavant remains under protected status here." Jack nodded gratefully. "Thank you, Doctor, for everything. I serve medical ethics, not political agendas," the Rigelian replied simply. "Though I should warn you both, this action will escalate the situation considerably. Both your governments will view it as a challenge to their authority." "We understand the consequences," Kelia assured him. When they were alone again, Jack helped Kelia back to her room, conscious of her fatigue. "You should rest before tomorrow's hearing." "There's little time for rest," she countered, though she did settle onto the bed. "We need to prepare our presentation for the council." Jack sat beside her. "We have allies, solid medical documentation, and precedent on our side." But more importantly, he placed his hand gently over hers where it rested on her abdomen. "We have something worth fighting for." Kelia's luminescence pulsed in sync with his words, creating patterns of remarkable beauty that he'd never seen before. "Yes," she agreed softly, "something neither of us anticipated, but both now cherish." In that quiet moment, Jack realized how profoundly things had changed. What had begun as petty revenge had evolved into the most significant relationship of his life. The arrogant ambassador who had once infuriated him now inspired his deepest admiration and affection. "Kelia," he said quietly, "whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know that I—" A subtle shift in her luminescence stopped him. She placed a finger against his lips, silver eyes luminous with emotion. "I know, Jack. I feel it too." Their foreheads touched gently, an intimate gesture that bridged their different physiologies with shared emotion. Tomorrow would bring political battles and life-altering decisions. But tonight, in this moment of connection, they found certainty in each other. The future remained uncertain, but facing it together no longer seemed impossible. It felt inevitable. The council chamber hummed with tension as delegates from 24 worlds took their places. News of the sanctuary petition had spread rapidly, drawing unprecedented attendance. Jack stood beside Kelia near the petitioner's platform, acutely aware of the hostile glares from both Earth and Auroran delegations. "Quite the attendance," he murmured, scanning the chamber. "We've certainly captured the galaxy's attention." Kelia's luminescence remained carefully controlled, revealing nothing of her inner state to the assembled dignitaries. "Attention can be leveraged," she replied quietly. "Remember the strategy." Jack nodded. They had prepared meticulously through the night, refining arguments and anticipating counterpoints. Though exhausted, Kelia appeared outwardly composed in formal Auroran diplomatic attire that elegantly accommodated her slightly changed physiology. The Rigelian chairperson called the session to order with unusual solemnity. "Distinguished representatives, today's emergency session addresses an unprecedented petition for medical sanctuary filed by Ambassador Kelia Tavant of Aurora concerning her hybrid pregnancy with Commander John Reynolds of Earth." Murmurs rippled through the chamber as the chairperson continued. "This case presents novel questions of interspecies medical ethics, diplomatic jurisdiction, and parental rights. We will hear from all concerned parties before rendering judgment." The Auroran High Counselor spoke first, his luminescence pulsing with formal patterns of outrage. "The Council should reject this petition immediately. Ambassador Tavant's medical needs are an internal Auroran matter. Her condition, while unusual, falls under our jurisdiction as she is an Auroran citizen." Undersecretary Hammond countered for Earth. "Given the hybrid nature of the embryo, Earth asserts equal interest in Ambassador Tavant's care. The child is genetically half-human and therefore subject to Earth protection statutes." For 2 hours, representatives argued jurisdictional points, cited obscure precedents, and made increasingly pointed accusations. Jack observed how skillfully both governments avoided addressing the central reality, that they viewed the developing child as a political and scientific asset rather than a person. Finally, the chairperson turned to Kelia. "Ambassador Tavant, as the petitioner, you may now address the council." Kelia rose with deliberate grace, her luminescence brightening to formal address patterns. The chamber quieted as she took her position at the center of the speaking platform. "Distinguished representatives," she began, her melodic voice carrying clearly. "I stand before you not merely as a Auroran ambassador, but as a mother facing unprecedented circumstances." She placed a hand on her abdomen, drawing all eyes to the physical reality of her condition. "Within me grows a child of 2 worlds, a biological impossibility that challenges our understanding of genetics and evolution." With meticulous clarity, she outlined the medical complications, the conflicting treatment protocols proposed by Earth and Aurora, and the risks of politically motivated decisions superseding medical best practices. "I do not petition against my home world," she emphasized. "I petition for neutral expertise and balanced consideration of all factors affecting this child's well-being." Jack watched with admiration as she commanded the chamber's attention. This was Kelia at her diplomatic finest, persuasive, authoritative, and unexpectedly moving as she spoke of the child's right to a future unburdened by political manipulation. This unprecedented life represents not a diplomatic incident to be managed, but an opportunity for genuine understanding between our species, she concluded. "I ask the Council to ensure that opportunity is not lost to political expedience." As she returned to her seat, Jack squeezed her hand briefly in silent support. Then it was his turn to address the assembly. He spoke not as a military commander, but as a father, emphasizing the shared responsibility that transcended political boundaries. He presented evidence of both governments' attempts to control access to the child for strategic purposes, contrasting them with the independent medical recommendations focused solely on health outcomes. "This child did not ask to be a symbol or a scientific curiosity," he stated firmly. "Yet his or her existence has profound implications for all our species. The question before this council is whether those implications will be explored through cooperation or competition. The chamber fell silent as Jack concluded with a formal request. We petition for council protection and oversight during the pregnancy, birth, and early development of the first documented human Aurora child, not to exclude either of our home worlds, but to ensure both have appropriate access and input without sacrificing the child's fundamental rights as a sentient being. When he finished, the silence held for several seconds before erupting into overlapping debates. The chairperson called for order repeatedly as delegates argued points and counterpoints. The Aquarian representative, true to their earlier commitment, spoke powerfully in support of the petition. This unprecedented biological development deserves the highest level of neutral scientific oversight. Neither Earth nor Aurora alone possesses sufficient expertise in hybrid physiology. The Centauri delegation added their support, citing historical precedents for council intervention in cases of unique interspecies significance. What surprised Jack was the unexpected support from the Taurian representative, General Krav himself. The reptilian diplomat rose with characteristic military bearing. The Taurian Empire recognizes the strategic implications of this development, he stated bluntly, which is precisely why neither human nor Auroran jurisdiction alone is appropriate. Council oversight provides necessary checks against any single species gaining unfair advantage from this genetic breakthrough. Jack exchanged a glance with Kelia. They hadn't anticipated Taurian support, but it made strategic sense. No one wanted potential advantages limited to their rivals. After hours of debate, the council entered closed deliberation. Jack and Kelia waited in a private antechamber, too tense for conversation. Her luminescence pulsed with muted anxiety, and he found himself unconsciously matching his breathing to its rhythm. Finally, they were summoned back to the chamber. The Regelian chairperson stood at the central podium, flanked by representatives from the council's judicial committee. After careful consideration of all presented evidence and arguments, the chairperson announced, the Galactic Council has reached a determination regarding the petition for medical sanctuary. The chamber fell silent as delegates leaned forward attentively. The petition is granted, the chairperson declared. Ambassador Kiliatavant and the hybrid child she carries are placed under council protection for the duration of the pregnancy, birth, and initial developmental period. Relief flooded through Jack as he felt Kelia's hand grip his tightly. Her luminescence pulsed with barely contained emotion. Furthermore, the chairperson continued, the council establishes the following protocols. First, a dedicated medical team comprising specialists from Earth, Aurora, and neutral council physicians will oversee all health decisions. Second, research access will be equally granted to both Earth and Auroran scientists, with all findings subject to council oversight. Third, upon birth, the child will hold dual citizenship with protected status until maturity. Counselor Nevar surged to his feet, luminescence flaring with anger. Aurora protests this unprecedented intrusion into sovereign matters. Earth seconds that protest, Undersecretary Hammond added, though with less conviction. The chairperson acknowledged their objections with a formal nod. Your protests are noted. However, the council's decision stands. This case presents unique circumstances that transcend normal jurisdictional boundaries. As the session concluded, Jack and Kelia found themselves at the center of a storm of attention. Delegates approached with questions, congratulations, and thinly veiled requests for preferential research access. Through it all, they maintained a united front, navigating the sudden political complexity of their situation with the practiced skill of seasoned diplomats. When they finally escaped to a private council transport, Kelia's carefully maintained composure gave way to exhaustion. She leaned against Jack, her luminescence dimming to conservation patterns. We did it, she murmured. You were magnificent, Jack replied, gently supporting her. The council couldn't have refused you anything. She gave a tired smile. Diplomatic training has its uses, though I never anticipated applying it to my own pregnancy. What happens now? Jack asked as the transport moved smoothly toward the medical complex, where Kelia would continue to receive treatment. Now, Kelia considered, her hand moving instinctively to her abdomen. Now we navigate an entirely new diplomatic landscape, as parents rather than adversaries. The weeks that followed brought challenges neither had anticipated. A specialized living facility was established within the council's neutral territory, comfortable quarters modified to accommodate Kelia's changing needs, with medical monitoring discreetly integrated. Jack took up residence in adjacent quarters, formally assigned as Earth's liaison to the Hybrid Development Initiative, as the Council had diplomatically labeled their situation. His military career remained in limbo, but Earth Command had reluctantly acknowledged the political necessity of his continued involvement. Kelia maintained limited diplomatic duties that didn't require travel, participating in council sessions via holographic presence. The Auroran High Council, while still formally protesting the arrangement, had tacitly accepted the reality of the situation. Their daily lives settled into an unexpected rhythm of medical appointments, diplomatic negotiations regarding the child's future, and increasingly personal conversations during the quiet evenings they spent together. 3 months after the council hearing, they sat on the balcony of Kelia's quarters, watching the distant lights of spacecraft moving through the uppermost layers of atmosphere. Her pregnancy had progressed steadily, her body adapting to the hybrid life within her with the remarkable resilience of Auroran physiology. The Cephalian representative asked again about naming traditions today. Kelia mentioned her luminescence glowing softly in the twilight. They seemed particularly fascinated by the cultural implications. Jack smiled, reaching for her hand. The gesture had become natural between them. What did you tell them? That Auroran names carry ancestral harmonics, while Earth names often honor family or aspirational qualities. She hesitated. I didn't mention that we haven't actually discussed it ourselves. A diplomatic evasion, Jack noted with amusement. Well, should we? Discuss it, I mean. Kelia's luminescence shifted to thoughtful patterns. I've been considering a dual naming approach. An Auroran primary name that carries hereditary resonance, paired with an Earth name that honors your traditions. A diplomatic solution, Jack observed, but his tone was warm rather than mocking. I'd like that. They fell into comfortable silence, watching the stars appear as darkness deepened. Jack found himself marveling at the journey that had brought them here, from antagonists to reluctant collaborators to whatever they were becoming. Jack, Kelia's voice broke the silence, uncharacteristically hesitant. There's something I need to ask you. Anything. She turned to face him fully, her silver eyes reflecting starlight. What happens after? When the child is born, when the initial fascination fades, when our respective governments adjust to this new reality, what then? The question hung between them, heavy with implications. Are you asking about diplomatic arrangements or something more personal? Jack asked carefully. Kelia's luminescence pulsed with unexpected vulnerability. Both, I suppose. The Council's protection extends through early development, but eventually decisions must be made. Separate residences, shared custody. Arrangements, divided time between Earth and Aurora? Is that what you want? No, she admitted softly, which is surprising to me. Jack shifted closer, taking both her hands in his. Then let me propose an alternative. Not as Commander Reynolds, not as a diplomatic arrangement, but as Jack, who has come to care deeply for a woman he once foolishly thought he wanted to humble. Her luminescence brightened with emotion as he continued. We continue together, not because of obligation or circumstance, but by choice. We find a way to make this unexpected family work, not just for our child, but for ourselves. That would be unprecedented, Kelia whispered, but her luminescence betrayed her hope. An Auroran-human permanent bond? We specialize in unprecedented, Jack reminded her with a smile. First humans in the Council, first hybrid pregnancy, first diplomatic incident resolved through parental rights. Why not the first successful cross-species family unit? Kelia's luminescence surged with complex emotional patterns. The political implications would be enormous. I don't care about political implications, Jack said firmly. I care about you, about our child, about the future we could build together. For a long moment, Kelia studied him, silver eyes searching his face. Then her luminescence shifted to a pattern he'd never seen before, radiant, pulsing with an intensity that illuminated the entire balcony. Yes, she said simply. Yes to all of it. When Jack pulled her gently into his arms, her luminescence enveloped them both in a private aurora that seemed to bridge their different worlds. In that moment of connection, the distance between human and Auroran, between military commander and diplomatic ambassador, dissolved into something new and unprecedented, something that, like their child, combined the best of both worlds. For months later, under the careful supervision of the multi-species medical team, Kelia gave birth to a daughter. The child's skin held a subtle luminescence, less pronounced than full Auroran's but unmistakably present. Her eyes, when they opened, revealed irises of deep blue ringed with silver, a perfect blend of her parents' characteristics. They named her Lyra Tavant Reynolds, her Auroran name carrying the harmonic resonance of Kelia's lineage, her human surname connecting her to Earth's traditions. In keeping with Auroran custom, her full name included a unique tonal element that could only be properly pronounced with Auroran vocal structures, but Jack learned a close approximation that made Kelia's luminescence pulse with affection whenever he attempted it. News of the birth spread rapidly through galactic channels. Congratulations arrived from hundreds of worlds, along with diplomatic acknowledgments from both Earth and Aurora. The child's existence had already begun reshaping interspecies relations, opening dialogues about genetic compatibility that had previously been dismissed as impossible. A month after the birth, the Galactic Council held a formal recognition ceremony, an unprecedented honor for a newborn. Representatives from all member species gathered to witness the official recording of Lyra's dual citizenship and protected status. As Jack stood beside Kelia, their daughter cradled between them, he marveled at the journey that had led them here. What had begun as petty revenge had transformed into the most profound experience of his life. A family that embodied the very principle of unity through diversity that the council claimed to uphold. Counselor Nevar approached them after the ceremony, his luminescence carefully controlled in formal patterns. Ambassador Tavant, he acknowledged, then with slight hesitation, Commander Reynolds. The High Council extends official recognition of your family bond and the child's status as both Auroran and human. It was as close to a blessing as they were likely to receive from Aurora's conservative leadership. Kelia inclined her head graciously. The recognition is appreciated, Counselor. The child is remarkable, Nevar admitted, studying Lyra with genuine curiosity. Our scientists are eager to begin the agreed research protocols. Within the established guidelines, Jack reminded him firmly. Of course. Nevar's gaze shifted between them. I must acknowledge that what began as a potential diplomatic disaster has evolved into something unexpectedly beneficial. Your family has created new avenues for cooperation between our worlds. After he departed, Kelia turned to Jack with amusement glowing in her patterns. Was that an apology? As close as we'll ever get. Jack laughed softly. Politicians never admit they were wrong, on any world. Undersecretary Hammond was more direct in her approach. Congratulations, Commander, Ambassador. She's beautiful. Her professional demeanor softened as she looked at Lyra. Earth Command has finally processed your status change. You're officially appointed as Joint Cultural Liaison, attached permanently to the Council. No more military duties? Jack confirmed. Your new role is considered more valuable, Hammond replied with a knowing smile. Building bridges between worlds through personal example rather than strategic planning. As the gathering continued around them, Jack and Kelia found a quiet moment in a secluded alcove of the Grand Chamber. Lyra slept peacefully between them, her tiny hand wrapped around Jack's finger while her skin glowed softly with nascent luminescence patterns. Who would have thought, Kelia mused, that your petty revenge plot would lead to this? Jack grinned sheepishly. Not my finest strategic decision, in retrospect. I disagree, she countered, her luminescence pulsing with affection. It led us here, after all. To think I once found you insufferably arrogant, he said, brushing a strand of silver-white hair from her face. And I found you hopelessly primitive, she replied with a smile that had lost all its former condescension. They looked down at their daughter, living proof that the greatest divides could be bridged, that differences could become strengths rather than barriers. We still have challenges ahead, Keelia acknowledged. No precedent exists for raising a hybrid child. 2 cultures, 2 worlds, countless unknowns. We'll figure out together, Jack assured her. One day at a time. As if in response, Lyra stirred in her sleep, her luminescence brightening momentarily in a pattern that made Keelia gasp softly. What is it? Jack asked. Her first coherent pattern, Keelia whispered with wonder. It's harmony. Perfect harmony. Jack didn't need Auroran perception to understand the significance. In that moment, cradling their impossible child between them, the former adversaries found themselves united in a shared future brighter than either could have imagined. From antagonism had come understanding. From revenge had come redemption. From 2 worlds had come a new beginning, not just for them, but for all who would follow the path they had unwittingly pioneered. As delegates from across the galaxy continued their formal celebrations around them, Jack and Keelia remained in their private moment of connection, a human commander, an Auroran ambassador, and the child who embodied the best of both, illuminating a future where differences became strengths and ancient divisions gave way to new possibilities. In the grand tapestry of galactic diplomacy, theirs was now a thread that connected rather than divided, weaving a pattern of harmony that would continue long after the initial scandal had faded from memory. And neither would have had it any other way.